They would say, like, why would you take up the task to write the book? Like, did you think about that? Do people ask you that question at all?
Yep, it's been asked. And my answer is always, why not? I can be inspired by him. Do I have to be a black person to be inspired by a black person? That's ghettoizing. Why can't we all have black heroes, white heroes, Chinese heroes, Japanese heroes? I have a lot of Japanese heroes too. And Nobunaga is one of them, even though he wasn't such a great guy in some ways. And I know that that's a legitimate question to ask. And it is a legitimate question to ask. But I say, isn't it better that we know about this guy?
Welcome to another Black Experience Japan's video. My name is Ranzo, and today we have a very special guest with us today, the author of the brand new book, The African Samurai. Yes, Yasuke. You guys have heard the legends, the stories of this great African that lived about maybe 500 years ago, thereabout in Japan. And of course, this is the book, and the author, his name is Thomas Lockley, right here. And also as well, I'm sure you guys heard of the new movie. That movie, yes, about the life of the African samurai. Chadwick from Black Panther is coming out. You guys are excited? I am. I can't wait to see it. So we're gonna get into the real life. This is like the most comprehensive biography of the samurai. So far there's been like maybe like, you know, mostly fiction about who he was, but this one goes in depth. A lot of research went into it. It was 9 years in the making, so I'm sure this thing is, well, I've actually read half of it in like one night so far. I can't wait to finish it, but we're gonna get into it today. So thanks for watching. Let's get into it. So tell us about yourself a little bit, Thomas.
Firstly, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be coming on.
Yes.
This is my book. As you said, it's been 9 years in the writing. I work for a university called Nihon University in Tokyo.
Yes.
And my job is historian, researcher, and also a language teacher.
Oh.
And I think that Yasuke's story is so phenomenal. The world needs to know about it.
Yes.
He's an inspiration for all of us. And I think when we actually get into the details of his life, we can really see somebody who can help us in our modern day lives today. He's not just 400 or 500 years ago, he's modern day, right here, yes, right now, in your living room.
How so? How so?
I think that his life shows that people can adapt to their situation. He was taken as a slave, as a boy, probably around about 8 years old. He was trafficked halfway across the world. He gained his freedom. We're not quite sure exactly how, but he did. He then entered the employment of an extremely powerful man, a Jesuit called Valiano. Valiano took him as his bodyguard to Japan. In Japan, he causes a sensation. He's the first person of African descent to be seen in the center of Japan, and he's a star. He's literally almost treated like a god. And the fact that he must have been really scared. There were thousands of people trying to get at him. The building was being pulled down around him. There were people dying in the crowd because they were crushed.
The riot, right?
The riot,
yes.
Man. He must have been really scared.
Yes.
Then suddenly the most powerful warlord in Japan comes in, demands to see who's disturbing his peace.
Yes.
Right? And the crowd is got rid of quickly, probably violently by the soldiers. Yasuke is taken to Nobunaga's court, 5 minutes walk away, and he's got 5 minutes to go from heart pounding, nearly on the verge of dying, to being behaving really respectfully in front of the biggest warlord in Japan. He does it. He adapts to the situation. He manages somehow. The Japanese sources say he has a fantastic demeanor. They say he's innately noble.
Why did you decide to write this book? The inspiration, where did it come from?
I first came across this story 2009, so 10 years ago. And at first I didn't believe it. I'll admit that. It was just...
Yeah, okay. Very, very common. People think this is like a tale, like a, you know, old wild...
old wives' tale, right?
Right?
Yeah. Or just a legend, you know, there's legends all over the world of people that did this and that. And they're only half true, right? A lot of them are only half true. There's a bit of magic in there and blah, blah, blah. There is a little bit of magic in Yasuke, but it's more it's not the kind of magic. Oh, we get onto that later.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Anyway, I saw it and I thought, wow, what a man! What a man! Left it for a little bit. It kept on playing on my mind, and then the year afterwards, I was waiting for my.
So you read an account and you thought it was false?
No, I didn't think it was false.
Oh, okay.
I believed it because it was written down properly. But I just, you read a story, you finish it, and you put it down, right?
Okay.
And it's only at that time not so much was known about him, so it was only a few paragraphs, maybe a couple of pages, something like that.
In comparison to this,
now it's 440 odd pages. Yeah,
right.
But. So anyway, and then the next year I had a little bit of time. I was waiting for the birth of my first child, and we had about a month or 6 weeks before that. I needed something to do. It was an exciting time in my life. My wife was just wanting to put her feet up. It's a difficult time, so I needed something to do. I thought, I'll write a novel about this amazing guy that I discovered last year. So I started writing a novel, and then my daughter was born. If any of you are parents, you know what that does.
Yes.
It means you don't have time for anything like frivolous, like writing books. And so the project was put on hold for about 4 years. I'd probably written 25,000 words. Okay. And it was a fictional account. It wasn't. It was based on fact, but it was a fiction book. Then a few years after that, 2016, a very dear colleague of mine here was retiring, and I wanted to write a paper that he'd enjoy to contribute to his farewell journal. We do that when people retire, and what can I do that he'll enjoy? I don't want to just put any really dry paper in there. He likes history. I thought, all right, I'll resurrect the Yasuke project. It was 4 years. I'd done nothing. I'd read books and I'd kept it in my mind, but I hadn't done any writing. So I wrote the paper. I thought, I can't. 10,000 words was the maximum. I'll never make that. It'll probably be 4,000 words. I was up to 15,000 words. I had to cut 5,000, and I hadn't even told as much of the story I wanted. Yes. So I cut it down to 10. Gave in the paper. I put the paper up online, and then I've got people from all over the world contacting me within weeks. Yasuke, we're Yasuke fans. We know about this guy. Tell us more. Now you've got this factual account. You've made the story into a real story rather than just a factual account. Oh wow, this is great. This is something that he doesn't just inspire me. He's inspiring people from all over the world. You can read some of the accounts in the book. People who are in difficult situations saw his life and felt that they could continue with their own lives by looking at this amazing man from 400 years ago. That's something quite special as far as I was concerned. I then wrote the Japanese book, or the book that was translated into Japanese. It's factual. It's an academic book. Yes. And that was popular, and I was asked to write. Well, I was asked to write the factual one as well. But then I was asked to team up with Jeffrey Gerard, who was a very experienced writer, to write this narrative version, which you can see today. Yes. And that's how it all went.
What has the impact of the first one in Japanese? What has that one been like, the impact so far?
Well, Yasuke himself has become a lot better known through it. He's been on television several times. I've been on television to talk about him several other times. He's been lauded as a pioneer of multiculturalism in Japan. You talked about that earlier briefly, but for those that don't know about it, Japan is fast becoming a multicultural society, not in the way of the US or Brazil or somewhere like that, but somewhere where there are more and more foreigners living, visiting, and making their lives here. I'm one of them, and you're one of them too, right? And people look at Yasuke's life, and he made a success story of himself 450 odd years ago. And that is something which the Japanese are fascinated by, because it can be extrapolated to the modern day.
There's a few things I want to touch on, but tell us who Nobunaga was
Okay.
and is today in the Japanese mind.
Okay, Nobunaga is possibly one of the most famous people in Japanese history. He was a warlord who lived in the second half of the 16th century. He came close to reunifying the country after 100 years of civil war. Now, if you can imagine 100 years of civil war, that's the First World War 100 years ago till today.
Wow.
War, non-stop, everywhere. Chaos. Nobunaga was the man who Japanese people recognize as being the first person to really nearly reunify the nation, bring peace back to the country. And therefore he enjoys a very special place in Japanese history. Not only that, he was an innovative man. He was a very clever man. He invented all sorts of tactics, strategies for war. He pioneered the use of guns. Under his stewardship, by the end of the century, Japan had more guns than the whole of the rest of the world put together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing, don't get me wrong, but you can see the kind of guy he was. He was not a guy to think in small terms. He thought in giant terms. His castle was one of the biggest castles ever made, possibly in the world.
Wow.
It was the pictures of it that reached Rome. The Pope saw them. He couldn't believe it. He was flabbergasted. The Europeans just went mad for this. So he was famous throughout the world at his time. And he employed Yasuke. Yasuke was part of this pattern. He was a new guy, a new thing, and a new something so revolutionary to Nobunaga that Nobunaga saw him and this is my man.
So where is like Yasuke's place in the Japanese mind today, right? Because we spoke about Nobunaga and where he is, right? Where is Yasuke in the mind of the present day Japanese?
Yasuke is pretty well known in Japan. He's not known by everybody, but there's a good huge percentage that do know him. But they know of him as a legend. They know of him as Nobunaga's black samurai or African samurai. That's what they know. More than that, most people are not aware of.
Okay.
And the fact that his character is in computer games, it's in books, it's in anime, it's in manga, mean that they've got... warped is the wrong word because it's all positive, but they have the idea of the manga story or the anime story, not the real story of the real man. The Japanese book, which I published 2 years ago, was an academic book which delved in and in detective work worked out who he was, where he came from, and possibly where he went.
This was the first one, right?
Yeah.
This was the first one that was published?
That's right.
2 years ago. That was 2017.
2017, January 2017.
It's in Japanese as well?
It's in Japanese as well. It's translated. I didn't write it in Japanese, but this is the academic. This book, which was released last week, is a more narrative version that most people would find very, very easy to read. The idea is that we get to know Yasuke. You get to know Yasuke, you get to know Yasuke, I get to know Yasuke, and you don't have to be a historian, you don't have to be, you don't have to even particularly be interested in Japanese history or African history. You just need to be interested in an inspiring, phenomenal man. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, Yasuke.
As you said that, I remember when I was reading it, like there's a lot about Japanese history in the book itself, right? So if you weren't privy to some of the information, because I never read a book on Japanese history, like myself, I'm not that deep into Japanese history yet, but there was so much that I learned just reading the first 13 chapters of the book. So far, I will get through it. That was just one night. But it's like I learned so much, right, about that period. I think it said that Yasuke came to Japan, it was 1579.
Correct.
That was the very first time. And I remember the first, I want to read the first, if I can. Well, my copy, right? So I have my own copy. Let me get it. As you guys can see, we got the markers here. Like, the way they described him, right? He was like about 6'2". And in the book, it said that it was almost like a 7-footer by today's standards. So which means this man was huge. Like, can you imagine today, 2019, seeing a guy that's 7 feet tall, like towering above you? That was how he looked. Plus he was, I can imagine, jet black, like really, really dark, even darker than I am, maybe like the camera or even this book, potentially, right?
The color of ink. The Japanese sources say the color of black ink, so you can say that.
Right.
And
yes.
don't forget, he had the strength of 10 men.
10 men.
So it's a giant, and he has the strength of 10 men.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean 10 men. It's a euphemism for really, really strong.
So his image was striking. Like when I'm reading through the book, it's like I felt like Japan was a little bit multicultural, a little bit. Yep. At least when he landed in, I can't remember where it was because he was going to Nagasaki, but they changed the route to punish
Kuchinotsu.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Kuchinotsu. Yeah, so that's where they actually docked instead of Nagasaki.
That's right. Yeah.
Right, and when it was going in, it seemed like they were talking about Indians and Portuguese. And some Africans as well, right? So he wasn't the only African.
No. Mm-hmm. He wasn't. He was. There were many Africans who were sailing on the ships. They were sailors, they were bodyguards, they did all sorts of things, even accountants, merchants, but they stayed in the west. Yasuke was the first one to go to the center of Japan, Kyoto, where the capital was.
Yes.
Normally, the foreigners didn't go that far. They stayed in the ports, they did the business, they went off. That was it.
And that's why Nobunaga never believed he was actually black.
Yeah.
Because when he met him initially after the riot, because when this man went into to meet Nobunaga, that city, there was a riot. Okay, this man caused a stir, right?
That was the second riot. There was already one other riot in a different city.
Right? The second riot. Yeah. And that, I think that's what piqued Nobunaga's interest. And he's like, you know what? I want to see this man.
Yeah.
So when he approached him and appeared before him, he tried to wash his skin. And you guys know, if you watch this channel, you've heard stories about people, even in present day Japan, trying to rub the skin of people, asking them, wait, is that your skin? Can this come off? Yeah, we know it's 2019, but this was way back in 1570, 1581.
Yeah.
Yes, 1581, right? And he tried because at that time, as you said, no one saw a black person in that area.
Well, Nobunaga hadn't. Yeah.
All right, so can you imagine you're meeting this powerful individual and they're like, wait, bring me a bucket with water. Take off your shirt.
That's what he did. Stripped down to the waist. He was asked to strip down to the waist, and he was scrubbed. Of course, they didn't come off. So then Nobunaga throws a party for him. He says, "Oh, wow, this amazing guy has come to my court." He gets his sons in. He calls his nobles in. Probably calls the ladies in. They have a party, and he's the guest of honor. At the end of this party, he's made a rich man.
Yes.
He's given 37 kilos of copper coins. Now, that's an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think also that's a challenge to carry as well.
Yes.
So it's a joke in a way by Nobunaga. This is the kind of thing Nobunaga did.
But this was factual, right?
Yeah, that's fact. That's absolutely fact.
So
yeah.
I was going to read something, but I won't.
Okay.
But I just wanted to read I'm not going to read it, but I like the descriptions of Yasuke in the book, right? Every time he would show up, usually like in the beginning, just the way people were stirred. Like I think when it opened up in the prelude, I wanted to read just this one line, maybe, or hopefully, I don't know. Maybe we could read.
I'll be quiet and let you do that. Good.
Right? Just maybe a few sentences where this was apparently was it the final battle?
This is the final battle.
The final battle. When he emerged from the temple, right, and he towered before these three men, and they literally they were paralyzed. And they actually said that their helmets was to his chest.
Which would be about right.
Right?
Yeah.
I went to the samurai museum in Shinjuku, and apparently the samurais were really, really short.
Yeah, less than 5
were
foot
ponies,
probably.
not horses, like ponies. That's how short they were. Yeah. And I think the Chinese called them the name that they had for them was short people or something.
It's a little bit more insulting than that. I'm not going to say it on camera.
Yes, so that was.
I'll tell you later, Ansel.
Okay, so they had a name for them because the Japanese were small in stature, and then of course Yusuke being 6'2", can you imagine? So these three men were paralyzed before Yasuke. I keep saying Yusuke. Forgive me. Right. So I like the way you described them in the book. And I can see that even though he was amongst other black people or darker skinned people at the time, he was still striking. Yep. Right? His stature, he was muscular, he was maybe a polyglot, I guess.
He was a polyglot, but also we know that he was entertaining. He had a good nature. He was Nobunaga loved talking with him, is what one of the sources said. Mm-hmm. He couldn't stop talking with him. He was literally obsessed by the conversations. Yasuke would have brought in all this new knowledge of Africa, of course, though maybe Yasuke had forgotten Africa, he was taken for so long. Mm-hmm. But India, China, he was in Macau for a bit, Malacca, modern day Malaysia, and of course parts of Japan which Nobunaga had never been to as well. Nobunaga learns so much from Yasuke, and Yasuke is the first really distant foreigner that he's met that is not connected to the church or something like that. Sure, he's got Chinese engineers working on his castle. He's got probably Chinese experts in doing the silver and helping out with things like that. But those men were quite close. They're from China, which is a world that Japan knew. All of the classics, the culture came from China, and so Nobunaga knew that. Yasuke's the first person from a really distant way that wasn't connected to the church, wasn't connected to an outside interest, if you like, that he could talk to. And as Nobunaga's employee, literally employee, he was free. He was free to say what he wanted. He didn't have to worry about what Valiano thought anymore. He didn't. He may have done, I don't know, but he was there, he was employed, he was given a sword, he was given a residence, he was given servants of his own, and he was given a stipend, an income, wage, basically. That's why we say he's the first foreign samurai, or the first samurai of foreign descent.
Yes.
Because being a samurai, basically you're Japanese, so he would have become Japanese. There was no formal laws about that, but that's the assumption.
So I wanted to touch on a few more things, but I'll get back to it in the book. That I think for this channel is pertinent. Do you think it's in terms of like acceptance to foreigners? I feel like from reading the accounts and to compare that to some of the accounts even on this channel here and talking with other people, it seemed like they were more open and curious back then. Because like when I'm reading the accounts, it seems like, as you said, like in the book there was a section that spoke about they saw dark skin as like the demons or the gods. So it was, they never knew that you actually had black people really. So it wasn't more. So there wasn't any malicious intent or animosity toward them. So I never saw it in the book. Like it was mostly positive.
Well, if you go to, there's a very famous temple in Kyoto called the Kyomizu Dera. If you go in there, the first thing you see is a massive black god, Daikokuten. He's a Japanese incarnation of a Hindu god that's kind of become a Buddhist deity. He's just one of many other divine beings, including the Buddha, who's often portrayed as black-skinned from India, but the people of Japan at the time didn't know much difference between India or Africa. In fact, people nowhere in the world knew much difference about anybody else at that time. So the Japanese people of the normal day, the normal everyday Japanese people would have only seen black skin portrayed as divine. Or if you see the outside of the temples, the Onigawara, or the protecting the devils who are protecting the shrine against evil spirits, they're often black skinned as well. Sometimes they're red skinned, sometimes they're even green skinned or kind of bluish tinged, but they're often black skinned. And if you were on the street in Kyoto that day and Yasuke came up to you, that would be what you were thinking. This is a god or is it a devil? Which is it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that must unquestionably have contributed to his fascination, the fascination for him at the time.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then we've got to say that also that it wasn't just Yasuke himself. It wasn't just a black man who had things done to him. He did things himself. He was proactive. He was useful. He's an expert, a polyglot. He probably spoke, I guess, around 4 to 5 languages. He'd come through the world. He spoke very good Japanese, according to the sources. That would also have been quite courtly Japanese in a way we can't even think about these days, because the protocol in courts in those days was mad. It's like there's a lot.
I can imagine.
It's not just you walking into a market and saying I want some eggs or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like there's a whole load of stuff.
Next level Kegel kind of.
Oh,
maybe
more.
more.
Yeah.
And
so, I mean, he probably didn't have it down at the beginning, but he'd had practice in the West with Valiano for 2 years beforehand, so he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he had a lot of get up and go about him, and that's why Nobunaga really appreciated his company. And then afterwards, he goes into battle with Nobunaga twice, possibly 3 times. Nobunaga was on 3 campaigns in the year that Yasuke was with him, or the year and a half that Yasuke was with him. 2 of those we have definite evidence that Yasuke was there, and the 3rd one, it's pretty likely that he was. It's unlikely that he wouldn't have been.
So I remember in the beginning of chapter 12 was when he met him, and then by the end of chapter 12, which based on the accounts, it's like within a month.
Yep.
He became samurai.
Yep.
So he met Nobunaga, and then, because that's the part people are like, it's actually, I want to read the words. I think it's 2 sentences where he said it.
Be my guest.
and just the way he said it was, wait, this is actually, okay, too deep in. Chapter 12 should maybe be around here. You all see I got all the markers.
He's done his homework.
So it's actually, so maybe I read you guys like a little paragraph, a short one, where it's like, "You are my black warrior." That's what Nobunaga said. Reaching up to grip Yasuke's shoulder, the demon who will ride beside me into battle, the dark angel who protects me and my family up in my home. He pointed. The sword is a symbol of this. Alright? Wait, where am I? Yes, you are my samurai now. So those words, he said it. He pointed. The sword is a symbol of this. You are my samurai now. So this was when Yasuke became as we call him, black samurai. I know the book says African samurai, but we usually say the black samurai. It's the same thing. Yeah. So that was where it happened. So you need to get the book. If you are, interested in Yasuke at all, like, you should copy it, right? Get the book. And it goes into so much detail. I've had a wonderful time so far reading it. The only reason I haven't finished it yet is because of time, right? So by the end of this week, I'll be finished with the book. But yeah, it's you guys know, this is about the black experience in Japan, primarily this channel, and Yasuke had the black experience in Japan way before any of us were even a spermatozoa. Before even our grandfather was a spermatozoa. This is so far. How many generations?
That's like 15 generations.
Right? Right? So you think about it, it's a fascinating story. I like it a lot. And the thing, to be honest, like, some of you guys have been asking me, like, have you do you know about Yasuke? Like, I've gotten so many like messages and emails about it, and I'm like okay, like, everyone's asking me, like, oh, have you been? And then the thing about it is, the timing is impeccable. I could not have done it, because what happened was the announcement was made about the movie, right? The possible movie, and then I saw an email, right, from Thomas as well. So the timing was impeccable. I saw the email and I'm like, you know what? Let's just run with it. And we're doing this interview, and right. So yeah. Before
your viewers think that I did this on purpose, I didn't. That was a coincidence.
Yes.
The movie, the book's been announced for a year. Yeah. I mean, the movie guys might have made it happen. I don't know, but I had no idea the movie announcement was going to come out the same week as the book.
Yes.
And I'd already emailed Ranzo before the movie announcement, I think, or maybe just around.
Maybe the same day.
Yeah, maybe the same day.
Maybe after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I didn't do it on purpose.
So it's like so you guys are getting the answers.
It's
to your
destiny.
questions.
It's destiny.
Right? Well,
it's destiny.
All right. So we're here now, right?
Yeah,
so how hard was it, right, to get all the research, the historical evidence, and all that to support the book? How hard was that?
Most of the evidence had already been collected by other people, but it needed to be interpreted. It needed to be put in context. Nobody really thought about what many of these things mean. What did it mean to be given a sword or residence? What did it mean, for example, that the Jesuits were very glad to have him back and gave thanks to God for his deliverance at the end? That means to me that the Jesuits were, he was valuable to them as well as a human being, not just as because he was with Nobunaga. So the interpretation was there. I did find a few sources which hadn't been included properly about other African men from the time that might have been Yasuke. They might not. We don't know. They meet his description: 7 foot tall, very strong, etc. Good Japanese, those kind of things. So they're included in the book as well. So they're kind of in chapter 22, 23, I think. You can delve into those yourself when you read it, if you read it. And so I found those. But the actual core things about Yasuke himself, they were there. that was what I read in 2009 when I found his first story. There was nothing else extra. And when we make the informed research-based assumptions, that was also the work that I did. You can see behind you some of the tens, dozens, perhaps 100 books that I delved in. What did they eat at that time? How did they eat it? Who cooked it? What did it mean to go into battle? What were they wearing? Were they really wearing all that armor, or did they take it off because it was too heavy for fighting? All these kind of things. How did it feel to be standing behind a massive gun and working with the team? Because I think towards the end of the book, after Nobunaga dies, he was also used by the Jesuits as a gunner in a different battle. Again, you can read about that in the book.
And I remember you said something about the fact that a lot of people, there's a common misconception about Yasuke that he was a slave at that time. So do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Sure. There's no doubt in my mind that Yasuke was abducted from his home in a slave raid, almost definitely from what is now South Sudan. He was almost definitely a member of the Dinka people, and then he would have been transported through what is modern day Sudan or Ethiopia to get to the Indian Ocean and then taken to India. However, by the time he comes to Japan, I'm almost definite that he was not a slave. He had won his freedom. He had escaped. Unlikely. I think he'd probably won his freedom. In India at this time, slavery normally meant that when your master died, you were automatically freed. That was what happened. It was the law, essentially. Also, if your master disappears, which is what I think happened with Yasuke, e.g. he was defeated in battle, then you're free. You just go wherever you go.
So he wasn't a slave while he was in Japan?
No. Also, Valiano was specifically anti-slavery. It would not have looked good for Valiano to be served by a slave when he made public pronouncements against slavery. And also, at the time, Japanese slavery or slavery in Japan by people under the Portuguese crown, as Valiano was illegal as well. So I suspect that whatever happened, by the time he was in Japan, he was a free man, as much as people were free in those days. Everybody had a master, and you needed a master to survive, whether that was a warlord master or whether it was a Jesuit master,
so
as an employer.
So Valiano was a Jesuit that brought Yasuke to Japan from India.
Yeah, Valiano was a very clever man. He saw how fascinated Nobunaga was by Yasuke. Yes. Any clever person would say, okay, I don't need this guy anymore. Why don't you employ him? Why don't you take over? I'll second you to him in modern terms. I'm sure that's what happened.
Okay. So that's how we actually got to Japan and then to Nobunaga, right? So the first meeting was quite something. The first introduction. And it's funny because Nobunaga called him. Right, he called for Yasuke, not his superior, right? He called him like, you know what, I want to see this man that caused this riot, in my place. Who is this man? Right? So,
who dares to cause a riot in my city?
Right? Yeah. So you thought he was probably going to be killed or something. Yeah. But what differentiates your book from other writings that spoke about Yasuke? What would you say?
Well, the other writings have all been fiction. There's nothing wrong with that. I also wanted to do a fiction story at the beginning, but as I found out more about his story and actually the story surrounding it, the details, is better than fiction. This story couldn't be made up. It's got everything you could ever want, including personal inspiration. It's got romance. It's got violence. It's got mystery. It's got slave to samurai, poverty to riches, and then bringing it onto the modern day. In the 60s and 70s in Japan, he was used as an anti-imperialist icon. We go into politics. He's been resurrected, if you like, to publicize the freedom struggle in Africa, anti-colonial, and the civil rights struggle in America, to portray that to Japanese people at the time by two authors. Two books were written about him. Then we have an entertainment couple of decades where he's on television as just a bit part kind of thing in things about Nobunaga. and then he comes into, this is where the fiction comes in. He's in several manga. Those mangas get made into anime, or even one gets made into a movie as well, or a drama kind of movie, not a full-length movie. And then he's in two computer games. This is the entertainment Yasuke. And now, as I mentioned earlier, he's coming on to the factual Yasuke, the precursor to modern multicultural Japan kind of thing. I'm not saying that. People have said that to me. I'm repeating that. That's what people see in him as a pioneer.
So, is there anything like historically that we can see in present day Japan that sort of like leads back or dates back to Yasuke's existence or history? Like, because you told me about the castle, right?
Yeah.
So that was, he had a castle, okay?
Nah, it wasn't his personal castle.
Okay,
this is Nobunaga's castle.
Okay. I thought it was his castle, okay.
Yeah, sadly not. They did. The sources do say that that Nobunaga was considering giving him a castle.
Okay.
But then Nobunaga dies, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And Yasuke is there at the final battle.
And this is no more.
This is no more.
It's like a rubble right
It was destroyed a few days after the battle in which Nobunaga was died, in which Yasuke fought. You can still go there. You can see the bottom of the castle mount is on a mountain. It's a whole mountain or a big hill.
Yeah.
The walls around the bottom are still there. You can climb up the steps, but the bit at the top, the really ornate, the gold bit, the really lovely bit, that was destroyed, unfortunately. But I've been there, I've done it, and you can go there too. It's near Kyoto, less than 40 minutes from Kyoto on the train, so it's worth it.
We'll take you guys there. What do you want the book to accomplish? In present day Japan, of course there are issues, as we're talking about like multiculturalism or foreigners being in Japan. The focus of this channel is about the foreign experience, but primarily the black experience. And one of the reasons why that came about was because people were asking me questions as a black man about what is it like, right? Like it was incessant. It was, so I'm like, why not do it this way and get more people to share their experiences, right? Because you can't really base it off one person's experience, because of course there's so many factors, right? So then by having like a plethora of experiences, you can arrive at maybe try to form your own opinion by that.
Absolutely.
So that's what this is about. Yasuke, right? In terms of what this channel is about, is like a black experience in Japan, and the most significant one to date. And there's a part that I'm going to read before, because we're wrapping up now still, but I want to read a part about how black people are perceived back then based on your findings, right? And potentially today, you guys can see the videos and maybe get an idea of the temperature. And there was something in the book as well that spoke about that the perception was different then. So do you know where it shifted? Let me find it, because there was like, let me just read that part really briefly, really quick, if you can find it. It might be this one. Wait, fast forward. Okay, this is present day Japan. But it sounded like you want to say something.
I was going to say that in I think it's chapter 24 that is dealt with. There's a little bit which kind of fills in the time between Yasuke and today. There's a little bit there.
Oh, okay. I haven't reached that.
It talks in particular about, for example, the proposal in the 1930s to marry an Ethiopian prince to a Japanese princess, for example, is to make an alliance between peoples. I'm not going to go into it right now.
Okay.
Read the book.
You got to read it. It's worth reading. So I want to read this part. It's in I'm not sure. It's like chapter 8. It was saying like, while a man with black skin may have seemed remarkable to them, the connotations were entirely positive. Right, Japanese people seem to have had no negative images associated with dark skin at this period in history. On the contrary, many even revered it due to the fact that the Buddha was sometimes portrayed as black skinned. Moreover, there was also Daikakuten. Is that how I pronounce it, right?
That's the guy I was talking about, the god I was talking about earlier in Kyomizudera.
Yes, a Japanese manifestation of the Indian god Shiva, a deity of wealth and prosperity, who is normally portrayed with ebony black skin. So based on the book that you wrote, right, it's like it spoke about just the imagery The things that we talk about, because one of the questions that I ask when I do the interviews is, what do you think is the general attitude towards black people in Japan? And this book, when I felt like when I read this book, even though it was a horrible time in history, like 16th century, I think it was very bloody. It was a very horrible time. And the world, I guess, the foundation of the world is not very pleasant. But at that time, it's like the experience seemed to be almost like curiosity. Like people, you see different people, you're curious, just like Nobunaga's initial reaction to him, and just the way he was in the streets, and people seeing him and they're like, oh my God, he's just someone different.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's not just in Japan, and it's not just with Africans. When Japanese people went to Europe at exactly the same time, 2 or 3 years afterwards, they were received almost as gods again, like the three kings that came to Jesus from the east. They were kind of treated in the same way. You've also got American Indians being taken to London or other European places and being feted as well as these are guys, these are exotic people from other places. There was bad in this as well. There was exploitation, but the more you read about it, the more you actually see that there was mutual respect as well. And often it wasn't, I used the word brought to London. I meant that because they were on English ships. They had got on those ships on purpose, normally as diplomats. They were not being brought around. They were, and the same is true of Africa, from places from nations which are now part of Nigeria, for example. Around this time, you've got princes coming to London, being baptized in London, and making deals, essentially alliances and deals, as well as with Turks and North Africans as well. This is a time when people were more ready to accept if it was politically expedient and if it was the right thing to do. They weren't so worried. Religion was more important than skin. And I think if we look at it that way.
You spoke about that as well, religion, with Ham, because it referenced the Bible somewhere about the curse. But you said erroneously, people thought that was like Ham had dark skin, right? There was no evidence to support that.
And if you read it, it doesn't say that.
Yeah, so
I read that Bible passage several times just to work out whether that you could even conceive that
it could be misconstrued, not even possible.
That's it.
Right?
I agree with Martin Luther King. That is a lie.
Yes, because right. So, but the Jesuits, it seemed like they held that, like that's the reason why to almost, well, maybe the Jesuits and some other people just to say, well, this is why things the way they are, whatever the case is.
But the Jesuits also wanted to ally with Ethiopia. It's not a black and white thing here. The Jesuits tried, and the Portuguese specifically were going east to find the Ethiopians because it's a Christian kingdom, and they were trying to find allies. They thought Prester John, who is a mythical Eastern king or a mythical African king, was there, and they could ally against the Muslims through this. So there was entirely positive from that perspective as well. They were going to Ethiopia to ally and make a big Christian alliance against the Moors, the Islam. That's the way they thought. Religion was way more important than skin color. The mission in Ethiopia failed for the same reason as the mission in Japan failed. The Jesuits got too politically involved. They tried to do too much. They tried to interfere. They brought too many guns, etc., etc. But I mean, the basis was not skin color; it was religion, and that was the key point.
For the Jesuits.
In general, at this time in life, one of the things that I found out about in the book was that while there were many African slaves abroad outside Africa, there were also many African free people outside Africa as well. They were merchants, soldiers like Yasuke.
It's in the book as well. You can read that in the book.
These people became grand viziers. They became in India. They became like Malikamba. They became kings and princes in some countries, especially in the west of India, in Gujarat. They became powerful pirates, powerful politicians. Several became knights in Portugal. So one of them was a head teacher of a famous university in Lisbon in Portugal. Another was an archbishop in North Africa. Why didn't we hear about this before? And Yasuke introduced me to these things as well. I don't think, excuse me for using the phrase, black and white, it's grey. There was a whole different way of thinking about things
in terms of perception back then.
Yeah.
Like that.
That's not to say that Valiana himself didn't have some very questionable racial views.
He did, yeah, because I read some stuff that he said. I can't remember exactly where, but he wasn't too straight.
No, he was not.
Like back then, I'm like, as I said, it seemed like they were more, it was kind of like different in a sense, where it was more curiosity. And I'm like, because now as a black person, sometimes when you encounter a Japanese person, believe it or not, in 2019, you get some reactions where you're like, we got the internet. Like, there's so many things that I feel like there are some people, not everyone, of course, not everyone, act as though it was 1579 still. I'm like, what?
Well,
I'm like, how? Because it seemed like there was so much foreigner presence. Even Nagasaki became like this place, right, like a refuge for...
Nagasaki was a foreign city.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Like, there was so much going on all over, and I'm like, but now it's not... Then there was an isolation period. I feel, I don't... Was that a period where it's almost like there was a sort of purification, where there's no more foreign... I'm just asking because I'm not sure, because it seemed like it's a bit different. Like, shouldn't you progress from, oh, look, to now it's like, oh, yeah, you're not so surprised.
During the time after Yasuke's period, I'll just do a very brief roundup. There's about another 50 years where Japan becomes more and more international, if you like, more and more trade. Traders from different parts of including England, arrive. Then there's a lot of issues with Christianity becoming too powerful, destroying Japanese religious sites, for example, and the Jesuits were getting up to mischief. They thought they were saving people's souls. Let's be honest, they thought they were doing everything for the right reasons, but the Japanese didn't see it that way. They felt that they were not doing things the right. They were doing illegal things. Japan, for that reason and for a few other reasons, then closes its borders. But a lot of the people who were in Japan were actually foreigners, Chinese, Koreans, even some Africans. They married, their children were Japanese, and their descendants lived till today.
Okay, so I think the final thing that I want to say or ask, of course, you're a white man, right? They would say, like, why would you take up the task to write the book? Like, did you think about that? Do people ask you that question at all?
Yep, it's been asked, and my answer is always, why not? I can be inspired by him. Do I have to be a black person to be inspired by a black person? That's ghettoizing. Why can't we all have black heroes, white heroes, Chinese heroes, Japanese heroes? I have a lot of Japanese heroes too, and Nobunaga is one of them, even though he wasn't such a great guy in some ways. And I know that that's a legitimate question to ask, and it is a legitimate question to ask. But I say, isn't it better that we know about this guy, even if it happens to be me that's done it? The world is going to be a better place for knowing about Yasuke's story. I hope you agree, and let them know in the comments if that is the case. I will look forward to reading those comments too. Yeah,
and there's one thing I want to say on that. I want to tell, like, my story, because usually we would think that if someone else is writing it, that don't understand the struggle, right? Because sometimes when you share something to a person, for instance, I'm not a woman, but if a woman tell me something, I'm like, I can't really understand, because I'm like, okay, that's you kind of empathize a little bit, okay, but you don't really understand. So sometimes when I'm like, if someone is gonna show something, do they really understand, or are they gonna be as true as possible, like with the experience, right, without being separate from it? But one thing that I felt though reading the book is, like, you guys went into it, right? You never felt like it was
thank you.
You never, like, as I said, when you spoke about him, it was like in a very positive manner. I was like, man, I want to see the movie. Like, that's why I feel like he was someone that you could almost pretty much look up to. I felt that, so I never felt like it was lacking in that, or trying to downplay his significance. So that was a concern. Usually when we're talking about, because like literature about Black history or anything like that from anyone else, sometimes we're skeptical, because we're like, is it gonna be true? Or so I never felt that so far reading this book, which is, I think, is important.
I hope I haven't downplayed him, but I also hope I haven't upplayed him. I hope that I've gone through the line. And the thing you just said about trying to be a female, trying to write the female part, I agree. I've tried it, and it's really hard. I think I approach Yasuke not as a black man experience, but as a foreigner in Japan experience, an immigrant to Japan.
So you can identify with that.
I think in that respect, yeah. So I think I've identified with that respect of him, and I can totally understand why people would say this or that and whatnot. I think from that perspective, I was able to get inside his mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's good. So you found a place, because it
I think
is
so.
a foreign
I hope
experience.
so. It took me years to do that.
Yeah.
It took a long time to feel Yasuke.
Yeah.
That sounds bad, but I don't mean it.
But it came across good. But as you said, it's like the overarching thing is like a foreign experience, and then underneath that, then you might have individual experiences beyond that, right? The reason why this channel exists is because people like us are more concerned, of course, and I'm pretty sure people wouldn't. It's easy to know why. So that's why we have like different umbrellas under that, right?
Absolutely.
But I think it's a great book, guys. I definitely think you guys have been asking me questions, like a lot of questions about it, and I think what better way, right, to get the book. If you're interested, I'll drop a link down below so you can get it if you want. You can get into it. I've been reading it. I'm like more than halfway through the book now. It's been an amazing read. Right, a very quick read.
You can also listen to it on the audiobook if you so wish.
Yes.
Or Kindle.
The movie is coming out. Hopefully they do it justice, because even the book itself, they're not related, right? They're not related.
I know of at least 2, possibly 3 movies competing. So I think we can say there will be at least one Yasuke movie.
At least one.
At least one.
Yes, and this is almost like a movie. I'm reading it, and I'm like, I could see it in my mind. I'm like, they need to make the movie. And of course, you guys heard the announcement that Chadwick has been tapped.
And he said yes. I think he said yes. I mean, there were some comments in some of the online publications saying, he'd love to do this. This is a great story. You know, he wants to be in a multicultural kind of thing.
And he said, I think it was incorrect that Yasuke was the only foreign-born samurai,
all right.
but he is the first.
If I ever meet him, which I hope I do, I'll correct him.
Yeah, I think they put it in the article. But yeah, so he wasn't the only, but he was the first.
Yeah.
And maybe the most striking figure in terms of foreign-born samurai.
That's right.
So yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. I hope I did it justice, hopefully.
Well,
but guys, let us know what you think. Let me know what you think about the story, the history of Yasuke. It's not false. It's actually a legitimate and true story. He existed. He's not some type of myth or legendary fake person. So yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. They can reach out to you as well, right?
Yeah, please. There's a Facebook page, African Samurai. Please like it to keep updates. There is a website, africansamurai.com. Please visit it. It's not fully operational yet, so for the moment, perhaps the Facebook page, but it will be, the web page will be soon.
Okay, and the book is available worldwide?
With modern technology on the internet, it's available everywhere. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
In Britain, it's sold under a slightly different name, Yasuke. In the American version, it's African Samurai. So.
One last thing. I know we're going. Last thing. So I know usually when I heard about it, they put black. Well, I guess it's more accurate to say African though.
He is African.
Yeah, he is. Right?
And
they do say Black Samurai throughout this as well. Sometimes you got Black Samurai, you got different ways that refer to him. But yeah, he's an African.
I didn't have much choice about the title, but there was a debate as to whether it should be Black or African. And this was just about the time that, coincidentally, that Black Panther was coming out.
Okay.
And it was... These guys are Americans. I'm not American, so I don't quite know how the things work. They'd said it would be better to call it African instead of Black Samurai. But then Black Panther came up. And they said, maybe we'll go for Black. But in the end, it was probably 50-50.
Was there any reasoning behind it? I want to see. Let me know your thoughts. I really don't. The only reason I'm asking this is because I know you guys are probably going to ask. Someone is going to ask it. So let me know your thoughts. I think it's, after really reading the book and everything, I think it's fine, because he was an African. I think after actually taking it in, the name is fine. I don't think there's gonna be any problem. The movie itself, I think it's called actually African Samurai as well. So based on what?
I don't know.
Yeah. So in the I think there was an article in an article I saw, and I think something about African Samurai is going to play like that. So maybe they might change the name, who knows. But whether it's Black Samurai or African Samurai, we know who he is. The book clearly, talks about who he is and who he was and how he looked and all that. So it's worth the read. Get it. Right? It's funny how all this is just happening.
Thank you.
Movie, book, everything.
Yeah.
Thomas, again, it's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I will continue to enjoy your channel.
Nice.
It's a fascinating
I hope
channel.
you're subscribed.
Yeah, I've already subscribed.
Okay, good.
Yeah, already
Good.
subscribed. And Facebook too.
All right, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
So guys, thank you so much for spending your time watching this video. If you liked it, hit the like button. And remember to subscribe for weekly videos on the Black experience in Japan and also, of course, other countries across the world. Bye for now.
That